you can think of a block explorer as basically like the front end for a blockchain. And beyond that, it's also a search engine for a blockchain. It's optimized for computers to read, but not really for humans to read. How is this piece of information related to that piece of information, and presented in a UI as well as an API for people who need it.
Hello everyone and welcome to the new episode of Gateway.fm podcast. And today we are diving into block explorers. We will explore their evolving role in Web3 ecosystem together with our guest Andrew, a technical communications specialist from BlockScout.
Hi,
welcome Andrew.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you for coming. It's good to have you here as our guest.
Yeah, well, I should be welcoming you to Denver. This is my hometown, so it's great to see so many people here visiting Denver.
Yeah, that's true. So before we dive into our topic, could you introduce yourself, tell us about your experience and what brought you to blockchain ecosystem?
Sure. So I've been in blockchain since about 2018. I actually had gone back to school to study computer science and was introduced to Ethereum at that time and started to get involved. Was working with POA Network, which was one of the first Ethereum sidechains, and we needed an explorer. So that's
how it started.
That's what brought BlockScout into existence. It was one of those things, necessity required it. So we built our own explorer and used it for POA Network. We later went on to start the XDAI chain, which was another side chain based on a stablecoin. It's now known as the Gnosis chain, or just Gnosis.
We are working with Gnosis chain.
Yeah.
We run validators for them.
Yeah, so that was originally the XDAI chain. When that merger happened, BlockScout kind of created its own niche as an explorer for all sorts of different kinds of chains. And we've been doing that for the past 2 years. So I've been with BlockScout for a while now and seen it evolve from a tiny explorer for one chain to one that serves thousands of chains.
Yeah, impressive journey.
Yeah.
Impressive. So BlockScout is very well known in Web3 community, and we do deploy BlockScout as a default option for Block Explorer for all the rollups built with Gateway. Mm-hmm. But just in case, for those who are unfamiliar with the concept, could you give us an overview of what Block Explorer is and what problems does it solve?
Yeah, so you can think of a Block Explorer as basically like the front end for a blockchain. And beyond that, it's also a search engine for a blockchain. So behind the scenes, you have all this data from a chain that's being appended to the chain block by block. It's optimized for computers to read, but not really for humans to read. So,
that's true.
Yeah, what a Block Explorer does is take all that data, index it relationally so that you can search things, how is this piece of information related to that piece of information, and present it in a UI as well as an API for people who need it. And then beyond that, we also add a lot of additional data. So metadata that can be useful for people. For example, ENS names, addresses, different things associated with contracts, like what product the contract is associated with, the website, all those kinds of things. So a lot of other data to color the data that's on chain. Mm-hmm. And with smart contracts too, there's features so that users can verify contracts and then be able to interact with them. So it basically takes the blockchain data, creates a way to easily search it, and then adds a bunch of other data so that it makes sense for humans.
Could you give me some examples of real-world use cases when people turn to Block Explorer? Who those people are and what problems do they solve with the Block Explorer?
Mm-hmm. It basically touches everyone who's using a blockchain. So I'm sure you've used a Block Explorer when you've tried to send a transaction and maybe it says pending. And you're like, oh, is this going to go through? Check it on the Block Explorer. There's typically a link in the wallet there. And you will see, some details about the transaction. If it's gone through, how much gas was required, all the basic details. Mm-hmm. Developers use block explorers extensively for smart contract verification, which that means that on the blockchain, when you have a smart contract that's just on chain, it's just a series of bytes. You can't really tell what the methods are and everything because it's been optimized. So when you go in and verify that contract, then you can see the source code. And then you can interact with the contract. So you can call the different methods, you can read and write to the contract. So a lot of developers use it for those purposes. And then security researchers use explorers quite extensively. You know, with the recent Bybit hack, for example, people are trying to go back and see exactly what happened. So they can go and look at those specific transactions, see what calls were made, how these attackers were able to steal all those funds.
I hope that this will help to catch those guys.
Yeah, I do too. Or at least understand how those hacks happen so we can prevent them next time.
That's true. So Block Explorer is used by everyone, every user and developer of the blockchain.
Yeah.
That's correct. And BlockScout is one of the most popular existing block explorers on the market, but it's not the only one. Could you tell me like how block explorers differ from each other?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they differ in terms of cost, in terms of, for projects, for example. Mm-hmm. They differ in terms of what their indexer looks like, so how they're going to present the data. A lot of the differences are kind of on the surface in the UI. You know, there's block explorers maybe that cater to gaming chains, something like that, that might have a different look and feel. There's some social block explorers that more are thinking about how are users going to be communicating with each other within the Explorer. There's, of course, Etherscan, which is the most well-known block explorer, full-featured block explorer. And BlockScout has really taken that path as well. We're a full-featured block explorer providing all the information that people need, and it is open source. So that's the difference that we have between a lot of other block explorers. BlockScout's open source.
But let's say I'm a builder, I'm a developer, and I'm building my own chain, whether it's a layer 1 chain or a rollup, and I'm deciding on which block explorer to use. So what factors should I take into account? What will influence my decision?
Mm-hmm. Well, probably audience first. So you're going to want to think, who's using my chain? You know, what are they hardcore developers, or is it more of a casual users? Are they people who are using lots of other chains? Because if you're going to have kind of your own bespoke explorer, it's going to be difficult for people who are using other chains to get used to it. You want to have some kind of consistent tooling across different ecosystems. So if you have people who are using a lot of different chains, you want to probably choose an explorer that they're familiar with, which is one reason why a lot of people choose BlockScout.
So the more familiar, the more well-known a block explorer is, the more users it attracts. Like it's a circle.
Yeah, that's true. The more users, the more familiarity. And it's the same with any tools in Web3, right? You don't want to have to learn new tools every time. You don't want to have to learn a new coding language every time. We're kind of trying to establish these standards so that from chain to chain, you know, you're used to the tooling and you can just start using it right away.
Yeah, it's handy. So Block Explorer provides a very nice user interface to search for transactions, to get this information. But if I need this information, there's some events on the blockchain to trigger some events in other applications. Is there a way for like API access to make this different application communicate with the chain? Yeah,
that's actually a huge use case for explorers. So there are various APIs. There's a JSON RPC API that developers are also used to, and they can use that in their applications to gather any of that data and then present it within their applications. BlockScout also offers a REST API, and that's something that even Web 2 developers, all developers are more familiar with. And that's how BlockScout populates our front end, is through the REST API. So that's another tool that we offer that people can call the API, the REST API, and then quickly populate their applications. And with BlockScout, you actually don't need an API key. So you can get an API key if you want to increase your limits, but just out of the box, there's no key required, which is something that sets us apart.
That's easy to start using it as a developer.
Yeah.
But could you explain me a little bit the difference? Because indexer is also used to get information from the blockchain and to send it somewhere, to use it in some way or another. What's the difference between Block Explorer and indexer? In what way they solve more or less similar tasks? In what sense they differ?
Yeah. So a Block Explorer is using an indexer behind the scenes, and then basically it presents it in the UI. So it's kind of another layer of, not abstraction, but another layer of transformation of that data. And it also makes it very easy to search and find relationships between different kinds of data. And like I mentioned, there's a lot of metadata that's included. So whereas an indexer is just maybe taking specific things from the blockchain, an explorer is going to take a lot more items and kind of color those as well with different kinds of data. So it presents a fuller picture. But yeah, all block explorers are going to be using indexers, for example.
So Block Explorer can't survive without an indexer. Indexer is an essential component of a Block Explorer, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could theoretically, have something that just called the node and presented information, but it really wouldn't make sense because the indexer puts it into a database, and then you can access that much more quickly, and again, access that relational data.
I guess in this case, so the performance of Block Explorer depends on the performance of indexer backing it up.
Yeah.
And what indexer is backing up the Block Explorer BlockScout?
Well, we have our own indexer that we've been building for quite a while. We actually have several indexers. There's the way that it works when you start a chain, you kind of start two indexers at that time. You start indexing the real-time data right away so that you can get the next block. But then we have like something that goes back in time that starts indexing the chain from this point where you started all the way back to the Genesis block. And depending on how big a chain is, that can take months to get all the data that from the past. And then we have various other indexers that are grabbing other types of information and other things. So there's quite a few indexers actually that are running behind the scenes in BlockScout.
Can I plug in another indexer, not the default one?
I mean, someone could use the BlockScout front end with a different indexer.
It's possible because it's open source and I can do whatever I want.
Exactly. Yeah, you could figure that out. I wouldn't say that it would be it would be easy, but yeah, it would be possible. I was trying to think if I have any examples where that has happened, but typically chains will just rely on our indexer because we've been optimizing it for the past 5 years.
Yeah, they are well optimized to work with each other. Why to use anything else?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I see. And about hosting, like for clients that deploy Rollups with us, we host BlockScout on our servers, so clients do not have to handle this and do not have to worry about hosting at all. But if they deploy Rollups on their own, do they have also to take care of hosting for indexer of Block Explorer, or there are other ways to do this?
Well, certainly they can host themselves, and we've had plenty of projects who do that. Often we'll get a call a couple months after they started doing that and say, wait a second, this is kind of difficult, it's expensive, we have to have a dedicated DevOps team, all these things. So we've learned from that many chains would rather just have someone else do the hosting. And we do offer Explorer as a service where we provide hosting for chains who would like that. And it's really useful because, again, we've got the experience, we've got the DevOps team, we've actually got our own infrastructure, bare metal infrastructure, where we can host chains basically for the same price, if not cheaper than they're doing. So it often makes sense, yeah.
That's how you make money. I was wondering, like, if the BlockScout is a free solution, open source, how do you guys make money? That's the answer.
That's one way. We do get a lot of grants from the ecosystem as an open source project, which is a huge help. But yeah, our Explorer as a service is our primary way that we make money.
Okay, that's clear now. And in terms of supporting different chains, is BlockScout compatible with all the EVM chains, or?
Yeah, so we've been working to support different types of rollups, and we support optimistic rollups, ZK rollups, L1s, private chains, all EVM-based chains. And some of those require some customizations, but we've gotten to the point now where people can launch an optimistic rollup, for example, in a matter of minutes with the BlockScout.
And what challenges come with multi-chain compatibility?
Well, beyond those customizations, I would say like forks can be difficult because everybody's on their own schedule, right? So Optimism is doing their own hard forks at this time, and Arbitrum's doing them at this time, and Mainnet's doing them here. So it requires a lot of coordination and communication with the teams. That's probably one of the biggest challenges, I would say, beyond just small customizations that are required for every kind of flavor of EVM.
And what unique challenges come with supporting ZK rollups comparing to like L1 solutions?
Well, again, it's just basically getting that data that's on-chain into the Explorer. So with ZK rollups, there's different types of data. There's proofs and commits that differ from other types of rollups and other types of chains. So it's just programming for that and making sure we can show that data. It's not really that much more difficult than other kinds of rollups from our perspective. There might be something where we would show different information about the sequencers or something like that that was different from what was blockchain data, but typically it's just gathering that blockchain data and presenting it.
Each time you start working with a new chain, you have to do some development work to understand what data you have to serve.
Yeah, well, we'll check the RPC, and a lot of implementations are just straight out of the box EVMs, or now we're seeing lots of rollups that are just straight up optimistic rollups that don't require those kinds of customizations that we did need to do at the beginning. But yeah, if a chain is doing something different, has some sort of different data coming through, then yeah, we have to check that and make sure that we're indexing it.
Does it take long?
It takes longer than you would think because it's like, oh,
Days,
there's just
months?
this little piece of data, we need to switch it, but actually the indexers are fairly complex and everything's working together. So just changing one field has ramifications, for the entire indexer. It depends. Some changes can take a matter of days, some can take months.
And how do you make this decision whether you would support the new chain that reach out to you like, hey, we're a new chain, could you please add some modifications in order that our users could use BlockScout as a block explorer? How do you make a decision? Do you approve all the chains applying for this?
No. We'll check the RPC and we'll scope out what's required and start talking with the chain and say, do you want us to support these things? This is going to be what the time and cost looks like, and then leave it up to them. And often we're the best solution because it's easier to customize than a lot of other explorers. We can get it done more quickly. So often, those chains will decide to work with us. But yeah, it's really a case-by-case basis.
But for you, it's just the matter of how promising the chain is. Like, is there a big potential, big future traffic expected? Like, if it's...
It can be, yeah. That's one thing we take into consideration. What's the chain's future look like? Who's the team behind it? What are their use cases? All of those things. We might look into those, but we're agnostic as far as if a chain wants to work with us and they want to to pay for those customizations, then, and we have the resources, then we'll do that. But yeah, that's another aspect. You know, we always have to look at our resources and kind of prioritize based on, you know, what are the most important chains from our perspective, as well as, you know, what our engineers have on their plates.
And do you have plans to support non-EVM chains in future?
Yeah, we actually just launched a blog post about this, about supporting Solana. So this is something we're researching pretty heavily. It's a bigger lift than a lot of the things we do, but it would probably require rewriting a lot of our indexers. So that's where it gets pretty tricky. But we actually, I'd like to shout out Fairmath, which is another open source project that recently launched something called Shuttle, which provides BlockScout support for Cosmos-based chains, just right out of the box.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a really cool example of the community coming in, because it's an open source project, and being able to, you know, tweak the code and present it for their users, and that's something that's available to anyone now.
So enterprise blockchain solutions require usually privacy and access control to the sensitive transactional data, and block explorers are transparent by their nature, without permissionless access to all the information happening on-chain. So do you in BlockScout have any specific solutions for enterprise-grade blockchains?
Well, just the fact that we're open source, we can build those things in. We have some public chains that have decided to, you know, not show certain data. If they want to do that, you know, that's their prerogative. We don't have anything specific for enterprise in that way. We do work with some enterprise chains where everything is on-prem for them, and then we will have access to their infrastructure, basically. But yeah, like you mentioned, it's a bit of a tricky situation, because everything's transparent, and so you either have to have it in some sort of private setting, or you need to have the you know, the infrastructure basically being run by the enterprise, and then allowing some of our DevOps to have access. I think it's an ongoing thing that still needs to be solved. You know, there's several banks that do use BlockScout within their own organizations, but you know, it's not something that can be accessed from the outside.
I see. That makes sense. And how do you at BlockScout handle the scalability issues? We've been seeing networks processing more than 100 million transactions per day. Yeah. How do you handle this volume of transactions?
Yeah. Well, it's something we've been working on for the past 5 years. And beyond just like the infrastructure stuff, so optimizing the server environment and everything, BlockScout as a product, we've been optimizing the databases. And this is, you think of it like death by 1,000 cuts. It's like optimization by 1,000 little tweaks. So these little things that you wouldn't think make a big difference, you know, changing a field from accepting strings to bytes, or, you know, reducing join operations, all these kind of database, you know, underlying database things. If you take care of those, the optimizations start to roll, and a lot of little ones add up to big savings. So, you know, it's huge for blockchains, getting that data to the user as quickly as possible, right? You want to reduce that latency as much as you can. So that's how we do it, and that's how we continue to do it, and we're always looking at our indexers and our databases and saying, how can we make this faster?
Yeah, that's what we are working on as well. Like scalability. Yeah. Is our everything. Mm-hmm. And like having all these free features and capabilities of BlockScout just free and out of the box for all our clients who deploy rollups with Gateway is a major advantage for us and for our clients. But for BlockScout, this partnership with Gateway, does it bring something, like some advantages to you? Yeah,
I mean, it brings usage, it brings users, it brings eyes on our Explorer. And like I said before, once people are used to using a tool, then they seek it out in other places too. So really right now what we're trying to accomplish is gain more market share, gain more users and people using the BlockScout Block Explorer. Because it's open source, because it's transparent, supports decentralization, all of these things, we feel like it makes sense for blockchain users. There's still Etherscan, which is huge, but we're trying to cut into that. And by working with Gateway, it helps us to get more users and helps us to flourish.
And how do you see the relationship between infrastructure providers like Gateway and BlockScout develop in future?
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly. I think the pricing is still a little in flux as far as how does everyone get paid, get their products supported, all of those things. So I think that's still a little bit of an unknown, but right now it's more of just getting things out there, making sure that there's support for the infrastructure, and once there's users, I think those things will come.
Let's see what future holds for us. It's an interesting journey, and we are very happy to go through it with the partners like BlockScout.
Yeah, it's been great working with you guys.
Thank you very much for coming. It's very nice conversation here.
Thank you.
Wish you all luck.